What's up? What's happening? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Stand Up with Stan 77. I'm your random guy, Jackson Small, loves to bitch about movies and music. And if you're watching this on Animation Station, hi, I'm your guy with that Animation Station, and I'm going the station for anything and everything animation. I'm putting this on both channels because this is something that I know a lot of kids watch, as well as adults. Today, we are talking about the MCU. For those of you that don't know, last night I reviewed QuantuMania. And if you want my full-on thoughts about it, go watch that video, even though it is very short, because I had a headache that night. And I just wanted to get it done and get it on day one release. That way I could, go to bed. And good thing is, the headache has worn off, so I'll try and be a little bit more extensive here. I might go into a little bit of spoiler territory, but I'll try and keep it as spoiler-free as I can. Anywho, we are ranking all the MCU stuff today. We are ranking all 4 phases, as well as the start of Phase 5 with QuantuMania. We're going to be reviewing most of the TV shows except the Netflix ones, because I sadly have not gotten to see them yet outside of Daredevil. And yes, the Spider-Man films are in here too, because thanks to No Way Home, they are canon to the MCU. So, let's start. Oh, I should say right off the bat, though, I am a huge Marvel fan. I grew up on those Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, which, coincidentally enough, are the first ones we're going to be talking about in this list. And since then, I've pretty much been a huge fan of Marvel, and yes, I do think that the MCU has definitely fallen off since Endgame, but I still watch them, and I still get some entertainment out of them in one way or another. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Let's start with the tiers. First up, we have Excelsior. Sorry, this way. Rest in peace, Stan Lee. That is for you. The same way I did Stephen Hillenburg Award of Legends when I did my Nickelodeon show tier list. I'm giving Excelsior to the movies that excel greatness, that are God tier, that are the top tier films that you need to see even if you're not the biggest Marvel fan. Then we have great movies that aren't quite acceleration, that aren't quite the most amazing things ever, but they're still definitely worth watching. Then we have good, the movies that are, well, just good, not really much else to say. Then we have okay or average, followed by bad. And if you've watched Animation Station, that one should look very familiar to you, the Shadow Realm. That is my definition for the worst of the worst, the bottom of the barrel, the absolute abysmal trash. And then haven't seen, even though, again, that is all the Marvel shows that aren't directly made by Disney from the MCU that came from Netflix, with the exception of Daredevil, which I am going to talk about a little bit. So, yeah, Daredevil is the only one I've watched. I have yet to see Jessica Jones. I haven't watched Defenders. I didn't watch Iron Fist. I didn't watch Luke Cage. And I didn't watch Punisher, because I didn't hear very nice things about it, even though I liked Punisher in Daredevil. But you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. And Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because, well, I don't know. It just didn't interest me, outside of the Ghost Rider episodes. But I don't think that's really enough to justify putting it on any of these tiers. So, yep. We have a lot of movies to talk about today, and it completely messed up my order. Damn it. Oh well, I guess I'm just gonna do it from memory. So let's start with the one that started it all. Well, now it started it all, according to the past, year or so, with the MCU Spider-Man trilogy. This is my childhood right here, and here's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to stick the first movie in Excelsior, because it is one of those movies that helped create the comic book movies that we have today. Yes, it's cheesy. Yes, it has its corny moments. But it still did a great job adapting Spider-Man. And Tobey Maguire is still the best Spider-Man, and I will fight you on this until the day I stop breathing. And then Spider-Man 2 is a movie that I used to absolutely hate, especially considering all the overpraise it got, and I've always been one of those guys that just prefers the first movie. That's just how I am. But I do think that it is going into Excelsior. I've come around on it since my most recent rewatch about 2 years ago to hype up No Way Home. So I've come around on Spider-Man 2. It is a damn good comic book movie, and it's definitely Excelsior material. And then I'm already going to jump into the controversial opinions because Spider-Man 3 gets way too much shit, in my opinion. Like, why do people hate this movie so much? I don't... Okay, I get a little bit, Emo Peter and the shitty fucking dance scene, but I think that this movie is still good. Nowhere near as good as the first two, absolutely not, but it's good. I watched it a lot as a kid. I never got the hate for it. Yes, it has a lot of problems, but I still really enjoy it. I can't put it in great because it is very flawed, but I still really enjoy Spider-Man 3. It's going in the good tier. And if you have a problem with that, well, sorry, my list. Piss off. Okay, let's stop joking around. Now time to get to the actual movies that started off this MCU. Starting off with Iron Man. Oh boy. I mean, what can be said about this movie that hasn't already been said? Not only did it come out the same year as The Dark Knight, but it is a movie that, well, kicked off this entire big MCU. Without Iron Man, we wouldn't have any of these movies today, and they'd probably just still be scattered offshoot comic book movies like they were back in the 2000s. Because Iron Man is a damn good movie. It was Robert Downey Jr.'s redemption role. It had great special effects for the time. It had a great story. And the way it just perfectly adapted its source material while also adding its own unique spin. Yes, the villain is your cliche generic asshole in a suit, but putting that aside, the rest of this movie is still really good, and it still holds up all these years later. Sorry, allergies. So yeah, Iron Man definitely belongs in Excelsior. I personally think it's better than Spider-Man 2, but not better than the first Spider-Man because that's one of my favorite movies of all time. So, yep, that is Iron Man. Then moving on to another controversial opinion that I never ever understood is The Incredible Hulk. I think this movie's great. I really liked Incredible Hulk, not only for its visual effects, which you have to admit are great for the time, and the way that it was, well, pretty much like the redhead stepchild of the entire MCU, and the only MCU movie that ended up becoming pretty much non-canon aside from Abomination. But the people that shit on this movie, I just don't get it. I just think this is an epic Hulk movie, and after the horrible fucking Ang Lee garbage disaster trash pile, this was a much-needed breath of fresh air. And I still think Edward Norton is better than Mark Ruffalo, but that's just my personal opinion. I still really like Incredible Hulk. I still think it's a great movie, and it does not deserve half the shit that it gets nowadays. Okay, moving on. Moving on from that, we go to Iron Man 2. Oh boy, full of controversial opinions today, aren't we? Maybe it's from rewatch value, because I did watch a lot of Phase 1 growing up, but I personally really enjoy Iron Man 2. Yes, I see its flaws. It's very overstuffed. It's very just confused, both tonal-wise and story-wise, and it has a lot of problems, but it was the introduction of Rhodey, the proper Rhodey, not Terrence Howard because he left because he didn't like RDJ. And yes, again, the movie's very flawed and has a lot of problems, but personally, I love Iron Man 2. And it's one of those movies that I watched the absolute shit out of as a kid, so yeah, Iron Man 2, I can see why most people hate it, but I still have a great time with it. And a lot of the lines still crack me up. Like, sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to exit the donut. Yeah, just a not a great movie, but a very good movie, very enjoyable, and I will always love and cherish it. Then we move on to Thor. This movie, I've never been the biggest Thor fan. only one movie in this list I can really say, allergies hate me today, is actually legit good. But as for Thor, the first Thor, it's fine. Like, I like its visual effects. I think Kenneth Branagh did a good job with directing. And yes, they absolutely knocked out of the park casting-wise with Tom Hiddleston's Loki and Anthony Harris? Fuck, sorry, I forget his name. And then, of course, there's Heimdall. And, of course, Chris Hemsworth is a very good Thor, even if his movies aren't very good. But yeah, the original Thor, in my opinion, is just okay. I will personally watch Spider-Man 3 over Thor any day. Because for me, Thor just bores the shit out of me. You know what doesn't bore the shit out of me? Captain America, the First Avenger. This movie is awesome. I have always been a Captain America fan, and this movie perfectly did him justice. Chris Evans was great casting. I think it did a great job taking the military movie approach, and I just really enjoyed the movie overall. Yes, Red Skull was wasted and overly silly, but take that element out, it's a pretty effective, great, just outstanding comic book movie, and I will always love First Avenger. It is easily my most rewatched movie out of the first phase of the MCU. Well, not counting the Spider-Man movies. But I think Iron Man's better quality-wise, but Captain America is far more rewatchable. That's the way I see it. It's like two sides of one coin. Which makes sense considering the philosophies of both of them that leads to Civil War, which we'll get into later. And then we get to the one that broke pretty much all records and all limitations of any comic book movie. The Avengers. This is one of the only movies that I would say is just perfect as it is. Yes, I still think that Sam Raimi's Spider-Man is a better movie, but that's mainly out of nostalgia and because Spider-Man is my favorite superhero. That's just personal bias. But Avengers shocked the hell out of everyone. Not only was it a fantastic movie despite all the characters in here, but it was funny, it was entertaining, it broke box office records, and it was just a blast to watch. Not only that, it was super funny, and all the characters worked well with each other. And this was the introduction of the great Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye. Well, his proper introduction. We got a little bit of a taste of him in Thor, but this was really the movie where we first see him take full-on center stage. In a way. Obviously, the superheroes are the big thing here. I think Loki was a great choice for the villain. The story was well executed. And it's just a phenomenal film. Just all around, all across the board. Even if you're not a comic book fan, you can still have an absolute blast with it. And if it weren't for childhood nostalgia, I would put it like this. But because of my nostalgia, it's looking like that. I love Avengers, and it has rightfully earned all the praise and every little dollar from its box office intake that it got. So, yep, moving on. Now we're going to take a little bit of a break from the MCU because we have to talk about the other Spider-Man series. The Mark Webb Amazing Spider-Man, starring Andrew Garfield. People thought that these were just okay. Well, people thought the first film was okay and the second one was trash. But me personally, I enjoy the first one. I enjoy it more than Iron Man. But it really is just kind of a bit of a ripoff of Christopher Nolan's Batman. The way it's trying to do the dark and serious tone. But this one definitely is a little bit more lighthearted because it has that quippiness that seems like it's straight out of the comic books. I like the suit design, even though people hate the yellow eyes for some reason, even though I like it, and I think they really made this version distinct from the other Spider-Man that we've gotten in the past. And Andrew Garfield himself is a great Spider-Man. And the performances in here are great. It's just that the writing is what lets it down, because the writing outside of those funny little quips is just average. And that's what really lets it down here, because the action is still really good. The CGI, for the most part, is passable. And the acting is definitely the star here, especially, again, Andrew Garfield, who was a very underrated Spider-Man. So, yeah. I enjoy Amazing Spider-Man. I think it's a good movie. But the writing is its biggest problem. And that's why I can't put it higher on the list. Okay, getting back to the MCU. Sorry, but I have to bring this list up since it decided to reset the order I had it set at. So let's go ahead and scroll all the way back up here. If the stupid thing wants to load. Sorry about the sniffles. My allergies hate me when I wake up in the morning. I literally just woke up not even an hour ago and started recording, so. Let me see. Yep, okay, we're done with phase 1. Alright, moving on to phase 2. Let's see what we got here. Alright, Iron Man 3. According to the list, that's the next one, because we're going in chronological order, not the order you should watch them in. So, yep, Iron Man 3 is the next one. This movie got a lot of shit when it first came out because of its villain twist, which, looking back at it now, is actually funny and works pretty well. And Shane Black is a great director, and he definitely brought a style here. But the problem is, just like the previous 2 Iron Man movies, it's just another asshole in a suit for the villain. Even though I do think the Extremis fights are pretty cool. And, hold on, let me see if I still have this. Hold on a minute. Let me see if I still have what I'm thinking of. Do I still have it? Yes, I do. I do still have it. And this is another film I also give a little bit of bias because I read this book a lot as a kid. Like, this was one of my childhood books. This was a book that I got from a book fair when I was still in school, and I read it nonstop all the time, even though it is not exactly like the movie. There's a few scenes that play out differently, but I still love this book, and I still really enjoy reading it. And then it kind of got my hopes a little too high for the third film, and I will say it's definitely better than Iron Man 2, but I don't know. It's just good to me and nothing more. I don't think it's a bad movie like some people like to say, but it was definitely a bold choice for the MCU. So yeah, moving on. Thor: The Dark World is a piece of shit. It is bland, generic, dull, boring, and pointless. That's all I got. Moving on. What did it say was next? Guardians, I think? Where's the list? Nope, not yet. Next is Winter Soldier. Oh, Winter Soldier. Captain America: The Winter Soldier is not only an amazing MCU movie, not only an amazing sequel to the already great first Captain America, but it's also just an amazing spy thriller. Like, this movie is fantastic, and it still holds up all these years later. The way they tell the story of the Winter Soldier, and it has Captain America going rogue, and the twist that S.H.I.E.L.D. was actually founded and recreated and, catered by Hydra was a really good twist. I thought Aram Zola was a very, very effective villain, and I liked the twist of the Winter Soldier himself. This movie deserved to make every little dollar it made at the box office because It is a damn good movie, and people still rate it highly as one of the best movies in the whole MCU for a damn good reason. So yeah, Winter Soldier, it's better than the first Captain America, and it's still a phenomenal film. Just, yeah, love, love, love Winter Soldier. Alright, next, Guardians of the Galaxy. Oh, talk about coming out of absolutely nowhere and shocking everybody. This is a movie that no one had expectations for, that everyone thought was going to bomb. And what it ended up doing? It ended up becoming a fantastic movie that brought these Guardians into the limelight for the very first time. What makes Guardians of the Galaxy work so well is its wit, its humor, its charm, and its writing. The writing from James Gunn here is very, very strong. And the movie itself is still hilarious even all these years later. Does it have some problems? Sure. The villain, Ronan the Accuser, is absolutely wasted and underutilized, and there are a few moments that can just leave you rolling your eyes, but that's really just few and far between. The rest of the movie is fantastic. I love the first Guardians. It has always been one of my favorite MCU films, and it's going to continue being one of my favorite MCU films. Okay, what was next according to that list? I think it said... Sorry to do this whole back and forth thing, but apparently it reset the list I had set, so... Okay, yeah, Age of Ultron. People crapped all over Age of Ultron when it first came out, and honestly, I never really got it. Is it better than the first Avengers? No. But is it a bad movie, like some people like to say? Not even close. I personally think this belongs in the great tier. I always enjoyed Age of Ultron, not only for the darker direction it took and the introduction of Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch. Even though it did kind of piss me off that Quicksilver was pretty much wasted. The rest of it is great. I thought Ultron was a great villain. It's also the introduction of Vision. I liked its more dark and serious tone. And of course we got Hulk fighting the Hulkbuster. I mean, that fight alone made the whole movie worth it. So, yeah, it definitely went in a darker, more serious direction, but I feel like it was for the better. I really enjoyed Age of Ultron, and I still think it is a great movie. And then, ending Phase 2 of the MCU was Ant-Man. This movie... what cannot be said about this movie that was already said? It's witty, it's lighthearted, it's goofy, it's funny, and it's still a joy to watch. I have always had a love for the Ant-Man series, which you're going to see later in this video. And it is a great film. I can't quite say it's Excelsior because I feel like sometimes it can be a little bit too silly. I mean, the final battle takes place on a Thomas the Tank Engine train set. I mean, if that doesn't make you laugh, then I don't know what will. But it's supposed to be weird, it's supposed to be silly, and Paul Rudd is a great actor. I also liked Michael Douglas and Michael Pena, who stole the movie because he's just absolutely hilarious, and the way he recaps everything is just so laugh-out-loud hilarious. Yeah, I love Ant-Man, bro. It has always been a great movie to me, and it always will be a great movie to me. Alright, moving on. Moving on to Phase 3 of the MCU. I'm going to wait to talk about Daredevil for last because I don't really know how to fit it in here. Because Season 1 took place during the first phase, and now Season 2 is taking place during the second phase. It's a whole convoluted mess. So, yeah. Let's start with Captain America Civil War. Oh boy. Civil War. it was a hyped movie when it first came out, especially when it was revealed that Spider-Man was coming in. This was going to be Spider-Man's big entrance into the MCU with the new actor Tom Holland. And it was going to be the heroes fighting against each other. It was the adaptation of a very beloved comic book storyline from Marvel's pretty much entire history. And me personally, I think it is definitely up there as one of the best of the entire MCU. I know it's kind of debatable whether or not it's the same quality or even surpasses Winter Soldier, but to me it does. And it's not just because of the quantity of superheroes or the way it pretty much, flips the entire MCU on its head. But the way it was able to do all this hard-earned drama, all the twists and turns it takes, and all the really interesting reveals that they put in here. Not to mention the airport fight. That alone puts it in at least the top 5 of the entire MCU. So yeah, I love Civil War. And just having the introduction of Spider-Man in there was just a nice bonus. But again, Tobey Maguire will always be the best Spider-Man. To me. Okay, so moving away from Civil War. Actually, let me see if I can try to... Can I move this up? Maybe? Move this up a bit? And move this down. There we go. That'll make this a little bit quicker. Okay, following after the amazing masterpiece that was Civil War, now we move on to Doctor Strange. This movie had a lot of hype behind it, but after watching it, I gotta say that it was fine. I mean, the visuals are beautiful, absolutely no doubt about that, and it deserved that nomination for visual effects. And I do think it is better than the first Thor movie, but it's just another generic, stereotypical origin story. Yes, I do like Dormammu in here, and I do like how many things they tried to include from the actual Doctor Strange comics. And yes, Benedict Cumberbatch was a great casting for this role. But the writing and the story are just so generic and cliche that it kind of drags the whole thing down with it. Yes, Long. Long is hilarious, and he will always be a great MCU side character. But, I don't know, it just feels like a movie that it was all flash and little to no substance. Not a bad movie, though. I wouldn't mind rewatching it again, which I'm probably going to have to, because I think the next one up in Marvel's repertoire is The Marvels. Joy. I can't wait to rip that piece of crap apart, but yeah. I enjoy Doctor Strange, but it's just okay. Moving on from that, is Guardians Volume 2. Very divisive, to say the very least. I like the scenes with Star-Lord, and especially all the scenes with Yondu, because, spoiler alert, this was his last movie before his death. And his death was definitely great. And I do like Kurt Russell, but I don't know, man. It just felt like a lot of potential was left on the table. And compared to the first Guardians, it really isn't much of anything. I loved the first one, but going into the second one, I left disappointed, so... Yeah, that was one of the movies of the MCU that was really my first big disappointment, and I didn't really know what to think. I don't think it's bad by any means, but I don't know, man. In the grand scheme of the MCU, it's just okay. It has its fans, but personally, I'm just not one of them. I think it just went one or two steps too far. It has some great moments, but I don't know. It just went a little too far for me. Now, Spider-Man Homecoming, on the other hand, I love the MCU Spider-Man trilogy. Not as much as I love the Raimi trilogy, even though I do think it's better quality-wise. But I really enjoy Homecoming. I thought it was a nice return to basics movie that, yes, I wish it didn't rely so much on Tony Stark being the father figure to Peter Parker, but now seeing how the whole trilogy was planned out with Peter's character, now it makes more sense and it works better for me. It's very comic booky, and I definitely feel like Tom is that perfect combination of Toby and Andrew. He has Andrew's quippiness and snark, and then he also has Toby's steadfast need to help people in need. Like, he's that perfect combination. Not to mention Tom Holland played him very well. I thought Ned was a great side character. Zendaya, however the F you pronounce it, also did a great job in here. I just really enjoyed this movie, and I never got the hate behind it. And the best part of the movie was by far Michael Keaton as Vulture. Even though, yes, he didn't get to play Batman, because obviously copyright laws up the rear end would ensue. But it really felt like it was an almost Batman versus Spider-Man scenario, with just a little bit of Iron Man mixed in for some fun. So, yeah, it's a fun, goofy movie, but it's a fun, goofy movie that I enjoy. I love Spider-Man Homecoming, and I never got the absolute thrashing it got from the critics, calling it one of the weaker MCU films. Me personally, I really enjoyed it. I really love Spider-Man Homecoming. And in my opinion, it's still a great movie. Again, that's just my opinion. You guys don't have to agree if you don't want to. Now let's get to the one Thor movie I will outright say is fantastic. Ragnarok. This is a movie that I went into with no expectations, especially after the abysmally god-awful pile of trash that was Dark World. But by the time I finished it, my goodness, was this movie great. I'll put at the top of the great tier. It's not quite Excelsior. It's riding that fine line. Hello was a great villain. I thought the way they... Anthony Mackie, that's... No, not Mackie. Damn it, that's Falcon. Damn, I'll look up his name later. I thought the way they did off Odin was really good. The way the story played out was really good. Hulk had a nice arc that continued after Age of Ultron. And we got to see him in that awesome Gladiator Hulk armor, which was cool. The fight with Thor and Hulk was cool. Loki was hilarious. I really liked Valkyrie as a character. The action was great. And not to mention, unlike the other two Thor films, it had style, it had personality, and it was so funny. Like, this movie had me laughing my ass off for multiple scenes. Like, I have been falling for 30 minutes! And then the little scene with Doctor Strange was cool. And it's just an all-around awesome movie. Like, I can't say it's quite Excelsior because I do think in the final act it does stumble a little bit, even though I will admit I didn't see that ending coming from any miles away, especially because this was the movie going for that goofy, silly tone. But I really enjoyed Ragnarok, and it still remains by far the best Thor movie. So, yep, that's Ragnarok. Then, after Ragnarok, what came next? Black Panther, Infinity War, and Ant-Man 2. Okay, let's start with Black Panther. This is a movie that I do think is very overrated. But, let me get this straight, I don't hate it. When I posted my review of it on my Facebook, which link will be in the description if you want to check that out, even though you have to do a lot of scrolling, I said it was decent. It's a decent movie, and it has some good things going for it. Chadwick Boseman, rest in peace. You were a great casting for Black Panther. You surprised everyone in Civil War, and then you proved yourself in this movie. And then thought Okoye was cool. I thought Shiri was cool. I thought the whole King reclaiming his throne storyline was done really well, even though it's been done a million times in a million other movies. But Killmonger is what really stole the show here. Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger was so freaking good. Like, he still remains one of the all-time best villains in the whole MCU. But the movie itself does suffer from a lot of MCUism, some weak writing, and a second act that absolutely drags like a rock. So, for those reasons, I can't say it's an amazing film by any means, but I do think it is better than the 2 Iron Man sequels. I'll put it about there. It's the middle of the good tier. It is a good movie, but it is a bit forgettable, and I don't think it deserved to make the huge amount of money at the box office. Yes, I understand its cultural significance to the African American community, but still, I never understood why it made over $1 billion. It's just decent, at best. Worth one watch and nothing more. You know it's not worth one you know it's more than one watch and nothing more? Well, more than that, actually. Avengers Infinity War. Go right up there where you belong. Infinity War was a fantastic film. It brought everyone together from all these movies, and this was pretty much the big finale to what was pretty much the entire MCU up to this point. Thanos, after being introduced in so many post-credit scenes, really shines here, and he is the best part of the movie. I like all the little scenes with all the different characters. Gamora's death was absolutely shocking. And the final battle itself was great, even though it still kind of ticks me off that after only 2 movies, they, well, sort of, kind of, not really kill off Spider-Man. That part did piss me off when I first watched it. But seeing a movie where the Avengers actually lose is very unexpected, to say the least. Like, there are the Avengers. You expect them to pretty much always win. And this movie showed that that's not always the case. And there are repercussions for losses. In this case, wiping out half of humanity. And the snap that ended up becoming infamous ended up becoming a meme. So, yeah. It was an emotional heartbreaker, but it set up all the stakes it needed to build up to part 2. However, to help levity some of that dark seriousness, they threw in a goofy movie in between the 2 of them. And that movie is Ant-Man and the Wasp QuantuMania. Not QuantuMania, just Ant-Man and the Wasp. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I really enjoy this trilogy. And this movie is also great. Not as good as the first, because I do think it does go a little bit too silly. But it's somewhat grounded. It was really enjoyable. I was laughing my ass off again, and I just had a great time with it. And I can understand why some people think it's one of the weaker movies in the MCU, because it is very, very silly. But especially compared to, well, again, Infinity War, we kind of need a little bit of levity. And it really did serve its purpose quite well. I really enjoyed Ant-Man and the Wasp, and while it's not better than the first movie, I still really enjoyed it. I still think it's a great movie, in my own personal opinion. I think next is Captain Marvel, but I'm going to double check that, just to make sure I'm not getting things wrong here. Yeah, next is Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel is a piece of shit. Like, oh, this movie sucked so bad. Brie Larson is a terrible person. Brie Larson is a terrible actress. And this movie just outright blows on every single way, shape, and form, and it has always been one of my worst movies in the whole MCU. It is boring, it is pointless, it is generic, it is absolutely completely unengaging, and took what could have been a very interesting story and just threw it down the shitter. Like, this movie just blows. Like, every single bit of it was just a cringe fest. Yes, it was cool to see a younger, less strict Nick Fury, but that's really it. The rest of the movie sucks. The visuals suck, the acting sucks, the story sucks, the writing sucks. It's just a piece of crap. Plain and simple. Just straight up, grade A piece of shit. And no, it's not because it has a female lead. No. It's a piece of shit because it's a piece of shit. Don't play that sexist card with me. Because that's not the reason. It's the quality of the acting and the writing and everything else that this movie is a piece of shit. It'll always be a piece of shit. And it's only going to get even worse when The Marvels comes out in November. So yeah, I'm done talking about Captain Marvel. It's a piece of shit, and it should have just been canceled if that's all they had. Endgame, on the other hand, this was the big finale to the MCU as we know it, and really to the MCU's high point. This is the one movie I will say is better than Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Endgame was not only an amazing movie that perfectly ended off this amazing 10-year journey, I think it is, something like that. But it also just did every single thing right. And that final battle is so far the best fight in the whole MCU. Like, it is amazing. And the way it ends is really nice. I especially love the way it concludes Captain America's character. And again, Tony Stark's Iron Man also got a nice send-off. I wish they didn't kill Black Widow. That part did piss me off, but it made sense as it was either going to be her or Hawkeye. And the way they were able to reverse everything was genius. Yes, I thought time travel was a bit of a weasel call, but you know what? That's really just a small price to pay, and we got a bunch of cool stuff in between. Yes, Fat Thor was a fucking waste, but take that out of the picture, you have a damn good movie in its place. So, yeah, that's Endgame. It is the best movie in the whole MCU. Well, not the best, but one of the best. Easy top 3. However, for some reason, they decided that that shouldn't be the end of the entire MCU, because, well, up to this phase. Instead, they ended up ending this phase with Spider-Man No Way Home. This is a movie a lot of people have a lot of mixed feelings about, and I can understand why to an extent, but me personally, this is the second best Spider-Man movie. Just right, well, third best Spider-Man movie. I'll get to the obvious number one when we get to it, but No Way Home was a great sequel. Not only did it continue Peter's storyline very well, I also thought that going on a road trip was also a really cool idea. I thought Jake Gyllenhaal did amazing as Mysterio. He's always been one of my favorite actors, and I'm glad he finally got his flowers here. The way it continues off of Endgame was perfect, and the way that Peter has to try and move on from Tony Stark's death, and not to mention the fact that he kind of revealed himself as to his Aunt May. He revealed himself as Spider-Man, so that's one less person he has to, do that with. And it still has some MCUism, but it's the good MCUism. There's still a lot of humor in here. There's still a lot of cool moments. And I'm not going to lie, outside of one specific scene at the very end of what is by far the best Spider-Man movie, this black and red suit is the best MCU Spider-Man suit. Just, it looks so cool. It's unique. It's distinct. And it's really cool. Not to mention the visuals with Mysterio were mind-bending and awesome. Yeah, just No Way Home is always going to be one of my favorite MCU films, and that's never going to change. And I will never understand the amount of crap it got from some people. It was just a perfect continuation off of Endgame. Not as great as Endgame, but still good. Alright. Moving on from that, now we gotta talk about some of the TV shows. Let's start with WandaVision. This is the one that started it all, and it's the one that kicked off directly after the events of No Way Home. It was fun to watch when it first started coming out. Watching it episode to episode was a joy and fun to do. But watching it again, I saw a lot of problems and a lot of faults. Specifically in the writing, and especially towards the final few episodes where the whole thing felt like it completely flew off the rails. But it is still okay. Nothing more than okay, but you are okay, WandaVision. I wouldn't mind watching you again, but you're no masterpiece. And unfortunately, it didn't get any better with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is the one I was really hoping was going to be the great one. But unfortunately, it was not. And it was another one that was also just okay. I liked it more than WandaVision, because I definitely liked Falcon's character arc and the way it tried to tackle racism and police brutality, but outside of that, I didn't really have much of anything, and it felt, well, pretty much like a complete and total waste of two great characters. That's what I thought of that. And then there's Loki. This is the one great MCU show that I will always rewatch and always love and always adore. It's getting a second season for a reason, guys. It is a damn good show that perfectly extended out the MCU, introduced a whole big multiverse. It was funny without being cringe. And it was just entertaining all the way through. I will always enjoy Loki, and it will always be among the best of these MCU shows. Not a very high bar, but still a great series. Super, super excited for season 2. Black Widow is a movie that got the short end of the stick, to say the least. Because it should have come out years ago. Heck, it should have come out after Iron Man 2. But because of Disney and a bunch of other BS, it ended up getting pushed all the way back to Phase 4 of the MCU. And by then, it was too little too late. Yes, I thought Yelena Romanoff was an awesome character. I do like the Red Guardian. And I do like how they tried to explain Black Widow's backstory. The problem is they did this after they already killed her off in Endgame. So it kind of just saps all the wind out of the sails. Yes, there's a really emotional scene at the end with Yelena. And I'm hoping Inhumans definitely makes her into the amazing character that I know she can be. But this movie was a huge disappointment. And then Taskmaster was just a shit villain. So, yep, that's why Black Widow is going in the bad tier. Not Shadow Realm, far from the worst, but it is not at all passable. And at that point, after that, Scarlett Johansson pretty much just left the entire MCU and left Disney. For good reason. They really screwed her over here, and her movie is bad. It is a cluttered, clumsy mess. Moving on from that was Shang-Chi. Now, this is one that came out of nowhere, and I think it's one of the most underrated movies in the whole MCU. I really, really enjoyed Shang-Chi because it felt like the MCU's version of a good old-fashioned karate movie. Simu Liu is a great actor. I thought the story they were able to tell here was great. I was actually really compelled by the story of the Ten Rings themselves. This was the really good Mandarin that we've been waiting for, the action, some of the best in the whole MCU, even though there is a lot of CGBS. And take out the fantastical elements, and it's really pretty grounded in reality. And then, of course, there's Awkwafina, who's always a joy. And no matter what movie she's in, whether it's this, whether it's SpongeBob 3, whether it's Raya and the Last Dragon, she's just always a joy. Oh, or if it's the bad guys. But yeah, Shang-Chi is a movie that definitely deserves a lot more praise than the crap it's been getting online. It's low-tier Excelsior, but it's still Excelsior, and it's still a blast, and easily one of the best movies in the entire fourth phase of the MCU. Moving on from that is What If, the one with the infamous zombies episode that finally made the beloved evil Marvel Zombies official canon. But outside of that, it was just another okay show. Well, okay, I'll be nice and put it at the top of the good tier just for that zombies episode, because the zombies episode of this show was freaking awesome. But I don't know, it just felt like a lot of potential was left on the table, and the storyline they tried to do here didn't really work. But it did have the great final performance of Chadwick Boseman before his sad passing, so definitely gotta give it points for that. And I do like these new alternate reality characters they came up with, and I do think that What If was a great concept for a TV show, and I do like the CGI animation, and the voice acting here is also great. The problem is the writing and the story, when it's trying to be all connected together, just doesn't really quite work. It tried, but it just doesn't work for me. It's good enough, but it rides that fine line between good and okay. And if it weren't for that awesome zombies episode, it would definitely go into okay. Moving on from that, we have Hawkeye. This one was also pretty disappointing. But it's another one I will say is average at best. It is an okay show. I wouldn't mind rewatching it again. It is definitely better than WandaVision. But it just felt too simple. It was just too simple. I mean, I like the story I tried to tell here, and I do think that it has potential to be great if it does hopefully get a second season, which is a rumor right now. Once Jeremy Renner's out of the hospital, please continue sending him prayers. Hawkeye, as a character, will always be great, especially the way that they did him in Endgame, where he becomes, well, the last Ronin, pretty much. But the show itself was just okay. Okay at best. There's far worse, but there's also far better. Speaking of far worse, let's talk about the piece of shit that is Eternals. The only movie I can say I hate more than Captain Marvel. Was a train wreck. This movie was a train wreck, plain and simple. The writing was terrible, the movie was boring, the pacing was absolute slow burn, drag like a rock. The Eternals themselves are boring characters, which sucks because there's really good acting quality in here, especially from the guy from Train to Busan. It's just Marvel's version of Justice League, and a really bad one at that. I shat on this movie in my worst movies of 2021 list, so you guys want my more in-depth, rage-induced thoughts about this movie, go watch that list. But looking back at it now, it's just sad. It's a sad waste. It is a sad, sad, sad waste of a movie. Okay, before we talk about No Way Home, let's get this other trash pile out of the way. Amazing Spider-Man 2. This movie is a mess. Like, a complete and total mess. Yes, Andrew Garfield is still great as always as Spider-Man, and I don't think Jimmy Fox was the worst Marvel villain out there. but the writing was terrible. It suffered from Spider-Man 3 syndrome, trying to overstuff it way too much without having the actual capability of balancing everything. Paul Giamatti was wasted as Rhino, and the story is just a convoluted, super complex, and overstuffed mess. It is the worst Spider-Man movie, and it'll always be the worst Spider-Man movie. And I feel bad that Andrew Garfield had to end his series on such a pile of fudging garbage. I'm trying to minimize the cursing because this is going on Animation Station as well. But yeah, Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a terrible movie. And it'll always be a terrible movie. And it was a huge disappointment coming off of the good Amazing Spider-Man 1. So yeah, just hunk of garbage. Will always be a hunk of garbage. And since we're already talking about the Sony Spider-Man movies that somehow tie into the MCU, let's talk about Venom. This is a movie I know a lot of people are just going to throw right in Shadow Realm, but I gotta be honest with you guys. I really enjoyed Venom. I can't say it's great because looking back it has a lot of problems, and it is a terrible, terrible adaptation when you really look at it, as it's trying to adapt the comic book source material. But I thought Tom Hardy was a great Venom. I do like the action in here. It has some nice, funny moments and weird moments, and it's the one Sony Spider-Man movie that I will say is very good and really enjoyable. And since we are talking about that, let's go ahead and just get Let There Be Carnage out of the way. People love to crap on this movie. And yes, I do agree Carnage and Woody Harrelson was absolutely wasted. But putting that aside, this is a great movie. I've always had a great time with Let There Be Carnage. It had a nice upscale of action to it. The villain was a lot better this time. And it definitely had a lot more going for it. Yes, I think Carnage was done dirty, which sucks, even though I do think the final battle in the church was a really cool finale. I think Woody Harrelson did the best with the material he was given as Carnage, and I do think he is still good casting as the character. He just needed better writing. And the movie definitely has its silly moments, like when Venom and Hardy split and they both go on their own separate adventures, and it's just zany and weird for the sake of being zany and weird. But that's also kind of the reasons why I enjoyed the first Venom. So, yeah. Controversial opinion, and it may just be because I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, but I enjoyed both Venom movies, and I think Let There Be Carnage is a great film. Just my personal opinion. Please don't attack me in the comments section. Moving on. Now let's get to what is, without a doubt, not only the greatest Spider-Man movie ever, the great... If my freaking phone wants to stop lagging. Not only the greatest Spider-Man movie ever, not easily one of the best movies in the whole MCU, and not only easily the best movie out of this god-awful fourth phase, but it is one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. Spider-Man No Way Home is everything it needed to be and more. Not only did it give us what we wanted, all three Spider-Men on one screen, but it also gave us a great storyline to go with it. And the way, after watching this movie, back-to-back with rewatches of Homecoming and No Way Home, you see and it works well to its advantage. Yes, it does have a few little problems here and there. I do think Lizard got sidelined, and I think they could have done a few little things better, but this is made up instantly, not only by the two Spider-Men, but Willem Dafoe putting in his best performance as Green Goblin. Yes, even better than he was here. So yeah, No Way Home, it's the best Spider-Man movie, it's the best Phase 4 film, and in my opinion, the best movie in the whole freaking MCU. Again, huge bias because I'm a huge Spider-Man fanatic, but I love No Way Home. It'll always be super high up there in my favorite movies of all time. Moving on. Next came Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I'm kind of just guessing at this point because we're coming towards the end and I just want to get this done. So, Multiverse of Madness. I gave this movie a full review, so I'm going to keep this short, sweet, and to the point. This is a great movie. But it is a great movie only if you're a horror fan. If you're a horror fan, this is great. If you're not, then it's probably going to be just okay or maybe just not your thing. But if you're a horror fan, you're going to love the absolute hell out of this movie. This is an outstanding film in every single way, shape, and form in terms of its horror. Sam Raimi did an amazing job directing. It was way, way better than the first one. And I think it is still one of the best movies in the whole MCU. I always enjoy Multiverse of Madness, and while I wish it had a bit more multiverse to it, I thought it was still really cool. And come on, we had Scarlet Witch go crazy and kill off a bunch of other characters, including the fan-voted John Krasinski's Fantastic Mr. Fantastic, which I thought he was pretty good. And then we also had Professor Xavier as Professor X. Well, no, we had Patrick Stewart as Professor X in the MCU finally, and he even had his chair from the 90s show, which was a really nice detail. And yes, I wish they weren't just cameos that were outright killed off right away. And Wanda was a great villain. And come on, the movie ends with her versus a zombie Doctor Strange, using the powers of the dead. I mean, if that doesn't scream, go see it, I don't know what will. Phenomenal, phenomenal film, and I always love, adore, and cherish Multiverse of Madness. And I really hope that the MCU lets Sam Raimi do that fourth Spider-Man movie that he wanted to do. You know what should not be done? Miss Marvel. Trash. Terrible villain, terrible writing, terrible MCUism. Terrible story. And the way it tries to tie her in as a mutant is insulting. I gave her a chance because the first 2 episodes were okay, but the rest of the series just dove headfirst off a fucking cliff. I hate Miss Marvel. And the fact that it's getting a season 2 absolutely destroys my soul. And since we're on that topic, let's talk about She-Hulk. Trash. It had a good concept of She-Hulk trying to balance being an attorney and being a superhero trained by Mark Ruffalo's Hulk. But it face-planted. Hard. With some of the stupid, bonehead decisions that it made. Not to mention the terrible villain. Again. Megan Thee Stallion being cringy as always. And the final episode just being a complete incoherent, stupid mess that's trying too hard to be meta instead of actually writing a good story. She-Hulk sucks, and it threw all its potential out the window. But you know what also sucks? Love and Thunder. Following off of Ragnarok, I had expectations. And that was a mistake, because this movie is shit. Love and Thunder is complete and total shit in every single way, shape, and form. And it is the epitome of everything wrong with the MCU. Complete, total pile of garbage. You want my full rant on this movie? Go watch my worst films of 2022 list. But yeah. Piece of shit. Piece of shit and the worst movie in the entire MCU by a mile. Okay, let's get the stuff that I haven't seen then. I haven't seen Defenders, haven't seen Iron Fist, only watched 2 episodes of Punisher, haven't seen Cage, haven't seen Jessica Jones. I actually haven't seen I Am Groot, so I'm going to throw that there. Haven't watched Legends. Okay. I'm going to save Daredevil for last. Let's start with Moon Knight. This is the other MCU show that I can say confidently is very, very good. And I think that it goes almost as high as Loki. Almost. It's around that same tier, so I'll put it right next to it. But Moon Knight was the big surprise show that I didn't see coming. I liked its horror angle. I liked Rami Malek in this role. I liked the way that it told the story of Moon Knight from a more twisted perspective. I thought the fights were cool. I thought the imagery was cool. The visuals were cool. It's just a really cool kick-ass show. Not as good as Loki, but it's definitely on par. Love Moon Knight. Really hope that one gets a second season. Morbius, Morbius is such a pile of shit. Morbius is garbage, and we all know it. Just go watch my worst of 2022 movies list if you want more about it. But it basically sums up like this. Jared Leto is a terrible leading man in any superhero movie. The writing is terrible. The story is terrible. Acting is terrible. The visual effects are terrible. The fights are terrible. And the post-credit scenes are an absolute insult and a smack in the face. Nothing more to say. Like I said, just go watch my worst movies list if you want more on it. But yeah, Morbius is trash. It bombed twice, and it deserved it. Moving on. Werewolf by Night. This is another one I kind of went all in on in another list. In this case, the top 20 best movies list. But basically, it sums up like this. This is a movie. Yes, I'm calling it a movie. Shut up. That perfectly pays homage to the 30s and 40s horror films of the Universal monsters. And I think it did it really well. I like Swamp Thing's introduction in here. I thought the story was really cool, very good whodunit story. And since it was in black and white, they were able to get away with vicious blood and gore, because there is some great deaths in here. And the way it ends, while it kind of saps the wind out of the sails a little bit, and there is a little bit of that goofy MCU humor that shouldn't be in there, it's really a minor complaint. At 40 minutes, it is more than worth your time. And if you're a horror fan, it is going to be one of your favorites in the MCU. That's just a fact. The Guardians Holiday Special. It's okay. It did its job. It was funny. And obviously there was not really any stakes here. But I do like the Kevin Bacon joke. It still has that James Gunn wit, and it is far better than Guardians 2. But it really is nothing more than just a goofy little special. But I do like the ending, because it is very heartwarming and sweet. So, yeah. It's okay. I wouldn't mind rewatching it every holiday season, but it's definitely not a standout in the MCU. At least not for me. What is a standout is Wakanda Forever. This is a movie that completely caught me off guard, especially after watching the first Black Panther and being disappointed. This is not only an amazing film, but Rian Johnson was dealt the absolute worst hand with the death of Chadwick Boseman and all this other crap he had to go through. And he still managed to save it. Yeah, that looks about right. Wakanda Forever is easily a top 10 movie in the MCU. It was enjoyable. Namor was a great villain, surprisingly. The way that they told his backstory was great. I love the underwater world they introduced here. Riri Williams was actually great. In here, I really liked Ironheart, even though her suit was just no, her suit sucks. You dare argue that? I don't know what to tell you. And I love the dark, serious tone. And it has two great moments in the funeral scene in the beginning and the ending, where Shuri has to come to terms with the death of her brother. And Shuri throughout is great. And Okoye is great in here too. And Angela Bassett earned that freaking Oscar. Because she was amazing in here, even though, sadly, it's her last time in the MCU. She went out with a bang, and if this is the last Black Panther movie, it went out with a bang too. Love Wakanda Forever, and it's always going to be one of my favorites in the MCU. So yeah, that pretty much brings us up to speed. So all that's left now is QuantuMania and Daredevil. Let's start with QuantuMania. This is a movie I gave a 7 when I did my initial review yesterday. And I still think it is a 7. I think it is the weakest movie of the Ant-Man trilogy. But keep in mind, that's coming from a great trilogy. I really enjoyed QuantuMania. Jonathan Majors was great as Kang. I love the story they had to tell here. The world they created of the quantum realm was super creative. Bill Murray was great in here, even though it was just nothing more than a glorified cameo. Let's be honest here. Ant-Man had a great story in here. I loved his interactions with his daughter Cassie. I thought Wasp really got the shaft and kind of pissed me off a little bit. Michelle Pfeiffer was great. This is probably her best performance in any of these movies, and I'd probably go so far as to say her best performance since she played Catwoman in Batman Returns. Yeah, I would go that far. But it has a tone problem, because sometimes it doesn't decide whether it wants to be dead serious or goofy and silly like the other two Ant-Man films. And MODOK sucks. His CGI is terrible, and him as a character is terrible. And the way they try to tie it in to the other two Ant-Man films is pathetic. It's bad, it is garbage, and I absolutely hate that part of the movie. But the rest of it was a great time. I had a great time with the film, and I think it's a good start to this new phase of the MCU. And it's far better than that 46% on Rotten Tomatoes would lead you to believe. That percentage amount is bullshit. So, yeah. Go watch my review if you want a more condensed version of that, but yeah, I enjoyed QuantuMania, and I also really enjoyed the final fight between Ant-Man and Kang is definitely going to be another great villain in the MCU. I can already tell, so yeah, QuantuMania is a good movie. And I'm sorry, anyone who says otherwise, I'm going to disagree with you. Alright, let's end it with Daredevil. Oh boy, Daredevil. This is the Netflix show that came out of nowhere and surprised everybody. Not only because Charlie Cox is amazing as Daredevil and as his alter ego, Matt Murdock, but also because the show was made with so much love, care, and passion that yes, it is R-rated, and yes, it is very dark, but it uses that darkness in a very artistic manner. And I feel like that's the show's biggest strength. I don't think it's the most amazing thing ever, but it definitely goes in Excelsior, and it's a shame that it will never get to continue. However, I do really hope that Daredevil Born Again lives up to this show, because this show was really damn good. And I can see why it kicked off a whole little Netflix series verse of itself. And while I haven't watched the rest of it yet, I'll watch it eventually, along with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's still great. It's still a phenomenal show. And if you're a Daredevil fan, absolutely check this one out. Okay. That was a mouthful. That was an hour-long video. That concludes my top 10. Well, that concludes my MCU tier list ranking, up to date with QuantuMania. And if you're wondering how the top 10 best and worst of this entire franchise would fall out, here's how it would go. Number 10 would be Wakanda Forever. 9 is Iron Man. 8 is Winter Soldier. 7 is Civil War. 6 is Infinity War. 5 is the original Avengers. 4 is No Way Home. 3 is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1. 2 is Avengers Endgame. And number 1 is Spider-Man No Way Home. And as for the top 10 worst, including the shows, you would have Guardians 2 at Guardians Volume 2 at number 10, Black Widow at number 9, Dark World at 8, Amazing Spider-Man 2 at 7, Captain Marvel at 6, Eternals at 5, Miss Marvel at 4, Morbius at 3, She-Hulk at 2, and the number 1 worst is Love and Thunder. Just by a mile. I despise that piece of trash. So, yeah. That's how the top 10 best and worst will fall out. Up to date. And with QuantuMania, I personally think they are off to a good start with Phase 5. I know, like I said, next is probably Marvel's, and I know it's going to dive headfirst off a cliff, so joy, but I'm still excited for Phase 5, and outside of that trash pile, I can't wait to see what's next. I can't wait to see Daredevil, I can't wait to see Spider-Man Freshman Years, and I'm pretty sure Avengers Kang Dynasty is going to be amazing when it comes out, like 5 or 6 years from now, so yeah, I think Phase 5 is off to a great start after the abysmal Phase 4, so I think the MCU is back on track. And overall, I'd still say there is more good MCU than bad MCU, if this list didn't already make it clear. I mean, this is probably the most I have ever put in any top tier of any list I've ever done on either channel. So, yeah. That's it. Thank you guys for watching. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to both Animation Station and Cynical Stan 77 if you haven't already. And stay tuned, because next, I'm going to grab my handy-dandy binder, which is covered in dust, apparently. What's next? Next is the Cosmic Shake review for Animation Station. And for Cynical Saiyan, the next review isn't until the 22nd with Dierks Bentley's new album, because I don't have the funds to get Atomic Heart, but if you want me to, I'll react to some of the reviews about it and see what the overall vibe is of it, and then I'll definitely try to get it at some point. And then after that, it's just the 24th, which finishes off with my first impressions review of the new Kirby game, Logic's new album, and the movie Cocaine Bear. Or, sorry, White Powder Bear, because if I say the actual word, I get demonetized. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for February. So, thank you guys for watching, and until next reviews, whenever I see you next, my name is Jack Small of Animation Station and Cynical Stan 77. Feel free to leave your thoughts on these MCU movies in the comments down below. And until next time, stay marvelous and take care. Excelsior!